Is love always the perfect blend of passion and reason? The story of Isabella and Joseph is a living testament to this question. From years of waiting and preserving to when love truly began, they embarked on a journey full of challenges. But no one could have predicted that behind the sweet and passionate moments, there was something deeper and more surprising. When the heart stops beating to the rhythm of desire, does love still have the strength to survive? Follow this unexpected journey and uncover the secrets that were never revealed in a relationship that seemed perfect on the outside. From the very first day I married Joseph, our relationship had been nothing short of intense. It was as though we were two halves of a whole, drawn together by forces neither of us could fully explain. Yet both of us felt it. But if I were to look back now, I would say that our bond was also shaped by a series of choices, sacrifices, and promises made long before we met. I was raised in a home where my mother's values were unwavering. And from a very young age, she instilled in me the belief that maintaining my virginity until marriage was of the utmost importance. She would gently, yet firmly, remind me of this lesson, explaining how it would protect me from hurt and disappointment and help me grow into a woman I could be proud of in the future. As a child, I trusted her completely. She was my guide, my protector, and her words were law in my world. I believed in everything she said, not only because I loved her dearly but because I knew she always had my best interests at heart. Her words became a silent promise in my mind, a promise that I would hold on to as I grew older. But as time passed, that unwavering belief began to feel more like a challenge than a guiding light. As I entered my teenage years, things began to change. I was surrounded by a world that seemed so different from the one my mother had envisioned for me. I had friends at school and in the neighborhood who lived a life of freedom that I couldn't help but envy. They would talk excitedly about the parties they attended, the boys they met, and some even had boyfriends with whom they shared moments that, at the time, I only understood in theory. They were always so full of life, carefree and vibrant, and their laughter seemed to beckon me. They would look at me and say, "Come on, join us. You're missing out on all the fun." It was tempting. The thought of experiencing that kind of freedom, of being part of their world, tugged at my heart. At times, I felt like an outsider, wondering what it would be like to be in their shoes, to let go of the rigid boundaries I had grown up with and simply live in the moment. The temptation was real, and for a brief time, I almost gave in. But as the days passed, there was something deeper inside me, something my mother had planted in my heart, that held me back. It wasn't just her voice echoing in my mind, reminding me of what she had taught me. It was a quiet, unshakable conviction that I wasn't ready for that kind of life. I couldn't explain it fully, but I knew deep down that I needed to wait. The desire to explore was growing, but I was not willing to rush into something I wasn't prepared for. I promised myself that when I found the right person, when I married, I would embrace all that I had been waiting for. It would be my choice, in my own time, and with someone who loved me and respected me for who I was. The world outside might have seemed full of excitement, but I knew my moment would come. And when it did, it would be something precious, something worth waiting for. The journey wasn't without its struggles. There were moments when the pressure to conform to those around me felt unbearable. At times, I questioned whether I was making the right decision. But every time doubt crept in, I would remind myself of the promise I had made, not just to my mother, but to myself. I would stand tall and tell myself that this was my life, and I was in control of how I wanted to live it. When I met Joseph, I thought perhaps the journey would be easier. He was kind, caring, and truly loved me in a way that felt different from anything I had ever experienced. He understood me deeply, and in many ways, I believed we could share a life full of happiness and fulfillment. But as our relationship deepened, we reached an impasse. Joseph, in his love for me, wanted to take our relationship to a more intimate level. And for him, it seemed like the natural next step in our bond. He would express how much he loved me, how he wanted us to be closer, to share that physical connection that is often seen as an expression of love. He would sometimes tell me how he dreamed of the day when we could be together in every sense of the word. His words were always gentle, always full of love. But there was an undercurrent of impatience too. He would ask again and again, hoping that one day I would change my mind, that I would be ready to move forward. But each time, I would look him in the eyes and say, "No, not until we are married." The closest we came to crossing that line was in the softness of his kisses, which always felt like a beautiful expression of his love. But I would always stop myself before it went any further. It wasn't that I didn't care about him, I loved him deeply, but there was something about waiting that felt essential to who I was. I wanted the first time we shared that intimate connection to be something we could both treasure forever. It wasn't just about the act itself, it was about the meaning behind it. Joseph didn't understand at first. He would try to persuade me, telling me that love wasn't just about waiting, but about feeling, about being in the moment. And I understood his point. I wasn't blind to the desire that simmered between us. But for me, waiting was part of honoring something deeper, my values, my identity, and my belief in the sanctity of marriage. I would sit down with him and explain that this wasn't about rejecting him or not loving him enough. It was about wanting something more, something sacred. And I needed him to understand that. There were times when he looked at me with disappointment, his frustration clear. I could see he wanted to give me everything, to share every part of himself with me. And in those moments, I had to remind him that this was about building a foundation that would support everything that came after. Love, I told him, was about trust and respect. It wasn't about rushing into something, it was about creating a bond that would last. Our time would come. And when it did, it would be so much more beautiful because we had waited. As the months passed, Joseph began to understand. He started to appreciate why waiting was so important to me. It wasn't just a rule, it was part of who I was. A piece of me that he came to love and respect. Our conversations grew deeper, and our bond strengthened. I could feel the love between us, even when it was tinged with frustration. And I could see that, little by little, he was beginning to understand the depth of my feelings. Each time he asked, I would reassure him with a smile, reminding him that our time would come. And when it did, it would be something extraordinary. I told him about the couples I had heard of who waited, and how their love seemed to grow stronger, their bond more unbreakable. I wanted our future together to be built on a foundation of trust and shared dreams. And I knew that waiting would make everything more meaningful. Slowly but surely, Joseph understood. And in that understanding, we grew closer. Our love more profound. I had made my promise to myself. And together, we were learning how to honor it, not just for me, but for us. As a couple, it wasn't always easy to stay true to my decision. Especially when his words, laden with passion and desire, seemed so convincing. Yet, Deep down in my heart, I knew that I wanted to wait. Even as he kept pressing, urging me with every word, I remained steadfast in my promise to myself. I knew that there was something sacred about the idea of waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the right person. And when that moment finally arrived, I would cherish it with all my being. After our wedding, our very first night together was the culmination of everything I had been holding on to. It was the moment I had been dreaming about for what seemed like forever. Imagining what it would feel like to share that intimate connection with the man I had chosen to spend my life with. My friends, who had been with other men before, would often tease me, saying I was missing out on something incredible. "You don't know what you're missing," they would laugh, their voices tinged with playful mockery. "It's amazing." Their words, always so enthusiastic, left me feeling curious, even a bit nervous. They spoke of it like it was some exhilarating adventure, something that everyone should experience. There was a part of me that wanted to know what they were talking about, what that kind of amazing felt like. I wondered what it would be like to feel the excitement they described. Yet, despite my curiosity, I held firm to my decision. I wanted to wait, to share this experience with the person who truly mattered, my husband. Now, here we were, married, and finally standing on the precipice of experiencing it together. My husband had waited just as long as I had. He had never shared this part of himself with anyone else. And I could see in his eyes that he, too, was filled with anticipation and eagerness. It was as if we were both standing on the edge of something monumental, ready to leap into the unknown together. As we stepped into our bedroom that night, there was a certain magic in the air. It was as if everything had been building up to this moment. The excitement buzzed between us. But there was also an undeniable nervousness. Neither of us really knew what to expect. This was the first time we would share this intimacy. And even though we had prepared ourselves for it, I couldn't help but feel a little shy. I could sense that my husband was feeling the same way. We looked at each other, our eyes locking, and I could feel the intensity of the moment. There was no need for words, everything we felt was communicated in that simple gaze. And then, without hesitation, my husband leaned in to kiss me. His lips were soft and gentle, and his hands were warm as he began to undress me slowly. Every touch, every movement, sent a shiver through my body. It was as if we were discovering each other for the very first time. I felt emotions I hadn't even known existed stirring within me. A powerful mix of excitement, tenderness, and a deep longing to be closer to him. As my husband continued to undress me, piece by piece, I allowed myself to be lost in the moment. But then, something unexpected happened. As I glanced down, I saw him, his tool, something I had never seen up close before. The sight of it startled me. It was bigger than I had anticipated. And for a split second, I was taken aback. The only time I had seen anything like it was when my little brother was younger. But this was entirely different. I hadn't expected it to look like that. And the shock left me speechless for a moment. But that initial shock quickly melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of curiosity and excitement. I felt a fluttering in my chest, and a rush of warmth spread through me. I was ready to experience what we had both been waiting for. My body was alive with anticipation, and I knew this was going to be a moment unlike anything I had ever experienced. As my husband moved closer to me, gently guiding me, the nervous energy that had lingered in the air began to fade. The connection we shared was deeper than I had imagined. And the closeness between us was something I couldn't have prepared for. Slowly, we came together. And in that instant, everything changed. The world seemed to fall away as we shared something intimate and beautiful, something we had both held out for. Something we had saved for this very moment. It wasn't just about the physicality of it, it was the emotional connection we felt. The bond that deepened between us. It was a feeling of unity. Of being truly and wholly together in a way we never had before. I had imagined what it would be like. But nothing could compare to the reality of it. It was a pure, unfiltered moment of joy. A memory that would be etched in my heart forever. I felt a shift within myself. A blossoming awareness of my own desires. Of the depth of connection I had with him. It was as if a door had been opened inside me. And I was suddenly more aware of the possibilities that awaited us. Every day felt like a new adventure. Filled with excitement and wonder. We began to explore this new part of our relationship with a sense of eagerness and joy. We laughed more. Talked more. And connected in ways that felt deeper than anything we had known before. Our bond grew stronger with every shared moment. Every shared experience. We created little traditions. Small rituals that brought us even closer, like cooking together in the kitchen. Or curling up to watch our favorite shows. And then, when the day was done, we would retreat into our own special world. Where we could truly be ourselves. Those moments, though simple, were filled with a kind of magic that made everything feel right. I cherished every second of it. And I loved how those quiet moments together deepened our love and made our connection even more profound. We made it a point to nurture this bond. To keep that spark alive. It wasn't just about the intimacy, it was about the companionship. The shared laughter. The understanding between us. And every time we came together, I knew that we were building something beautiful. Something that would last a lifetime. For some time, everything seemed perfect. My husband and I were caught up in the rhythm of our daily adventures. Savoring every moment we spent together. But after a while, I began to notice subtle changes. Joseph, who had once been full of energy, seemed more tired than usual. There was a certain weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. And I could sense that he wasn't able to keep up with our usual pace. I wondered if it was just a phase. But the signs kept growing more apparent. One evening, as we sat on the couch, quietly enjoying the stillness of our home, I could feel something was off. There was a shift in the air, an unspoken tension that I couldn't ignore. Joseph sat a little further away than usual. And his gaze was distant. Focused somewhere beyond me. After a long pause, he let out a deep sigh. One that seemed to come from the very depths of his soul. His eyes met mine. Serious and unwavering. "Isabella," he began. His voice soft but carrying a weight that made my heart skip a beat. "I really enjoy every moment we spend together. You know that. Right? But there's something we need to talk about." His words hung in the air like a fragile thread, pulling at something deep inside me. My stomach tightened in anticipation. And I felt a wave of unease ripple through me. What was he about to say? I braced myself, unsure of what was coming. He continued. His voice steady but with an undertone of vulnerability. "I love the time we share. But lately, I've been feeling like I need something different. It's not that I don't want to be with you, Isabella, it's just that I feel worn out." His words pierced through me like a sharp chill. I had always believed that the passion between us was something unbreakable. Something that defined our bond. And yet, Here he was, telling me that our intensity, the very thing I cherished so deeply, had become too much for him to bear. I listened closely, trying to grasp the depth of his feelings. I realized, with a growing sense of clarity, that while my heart swelled with excitement and energy, Joseph might have been silently struggling to keep up. He needed rest, space, things I had perhaps overlooked in my own eagerness to dive into our shared experiences. This wasn't just about what I wanted. It was about what we needed. For what seemed like an eternity, I was silent. My mind raced, and I could feel the floor beneath me begin to shift. It felt as though the very foundation of our relationship had been called into question. I had always believed that the strength of our connection lay in the fervor of our passion, that it was the glue that held us together. But now, with Joseph's words, I began to wonder if I had been wrong all along. How could I have missed this? I whispered, my voice trembling. Are you saying you don't love me the way I love you? Is that it? Joseph looked at me, his expression gentle, almost pained. No, Isabella, he said softly. I love you more than you can imagine. But the intensity, it's just too much for me now. I need us to slow down, to find a way to breathe a little. This isn't about my love for you, it's about the pace at which we're living. His words hung heavy in the room, each syllable digging deeper into my heart. I had never imagined that our passion, the very force that had bound us so closely together, could be something that exhausted him. If Joseph needed us to slow down, what did that mean for us? Was there something fundamentally wrong with our relationship? That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The ceiling above me blurred as my mind replayed Joseph's words over and over, like a broken record. How could I have missed the signs? I thought about all the times we had shared, all the moments of laughter and love. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Joseph's tiredness, his need for a change, had caught me completely off guard. I stared at him as he slept peacefully beside me, his chest rising and falling with each breath. A pang of guilt surged through me. Had I been so focused on my own desires and excitement that I hadn't seen how hard he had been working to keep up with me? I loved him deeply. But had I been blind to his needs? But how could I change? How could I slow down without losing what made us so alive, so connected? The idea of letting go of the passion, of toning it down, felt like I was giving up on the very thing that had made our love so intense. I didn't want to lose Joseph, but I didn't want to lose us either. The next morning, feeling torn and uncertain, I met my best friend Tor for tea. Tor had been my confidant for years, the one person who always seemed to know what to say when I was lost. As we sat in the cozy corner of our favorite cafe, I poured my heart out, telling her everything that had happened the night before. I just don't know what to do, Tor, I said, my voice a mix of frustration and confusion. Joseph says the passion is too much. But I thought it was the thing that made us strong. How can I change that without losing everything? Tor listened carefully, her eyes thoughtful as she took a slow sip of her tea. She placed the cup down gently, her gaze steady and kind. Isabella, she began, her voice calm and understanding. In any relationship, it's not just about the intensity. It's about balance. Maybe Joseph needs things to slow down a bit, but that doesn't mean he loves you any less. It just means you both need to find a way to be together that works for both of you. It's about compromise. Her words struck a chord deep inside me, though they also scared me. What if slowing down meant losing the spark we had worked so hard to nurture? What if, in finding a balance, we lost the very thing that had made us feel alive? Yet, as I sat there listening to Tor, I knew deep down that she was right. A relationship, even one as passionate as ours, needed more than just intensity. It needed understanding, patience, and a willingness to adapt. I took a deep breath, the weight of her advice sinking in. Perhaps finding that middle ground was the answer. But the thought of it still felt like stepping into the unknown. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. Still, I knew one thing for certain: if Joseph and I were going to make this work, it would require more than just love. It would require us to grow together. Slowly, but with the same tenderness and care that had always been there. That night, I finally decided to bring up Tor's advice to Joseph, hoping it might open the door to a deeper understanding between us. "I've been thinking a lot lately," I began, my voice tentative. "And maybe we can find a way to strike a balance, a way to still preserve the connection we have, but in a way that doesn't feel too overwhelming for you." Joseph's expression softened immediately, a mixture of relief and gratitude passing over his features. "That's all I've been asking for, Isabella," he replied quietly, his tone laced with sincerity. "I love you more than anything, and I don't want to lose what we've built. But I need us to slow down. We need to find a new way to be with each other, one that feels right for both of us." It was one of the most difficult conversations we had ever had. But in a way, it was also one of the most hopeful. For the first time in a while, it felt like we were on the same page. The fear of losing our connection still lingered in the air. But there was also a sense of possibility. Maybe we didn't have to let go of the passion entirely. Perhaps all we needed was to rethink what that passion truly meant for us, in a way that honored both of our needs. Over the weeks that followed, I made a conscious effort to listen to Joseph more attentively, to understand the emotional landscape that had been overshadowed by the intensity of our physical relationship. It was so easy to focus on the physical side of things, to get lost in the heat of the moment. But I realized that what we really needed was a different kind of connection, one rooted in understanding, patience, and emotional intimacy. I started seeking out ways to connect with him that didn't revolve around the physical at all. We spent more time together, talking openly and laughing like we used to. We took long walks in the evenings, enjoying the simplicity of each other's company without the pressure of expectation. These were the kinds of moments we had let slip away as we became consumed by the more intense aspects of our relationship. At first, it felt awkward, like something important was missing, a piece of us that used to be so central. But with time, I began to see that these quiet, gentle moments were not only meaningful but also necessary for us to reconnect in a way that was deeper than anything we had experienced before. I could feel the change in Joseph, too. He seemed more at ease, less burdened by the weight of expectations, more relaxed in my presence. As we spent more time together in this new rhythm, I began to understand something fundamental. Our love had never been just about the passion, the physical connection, or the fire we once shared. It had always been about something more, something quieter and more enduring. It was about understanding, support, and an unwavering patience for one another. Even when things weren't perfect, Joseph had always been my rock, the one who had been there for me through thick and thin. And now, it was my turn to be there for him in a way that felt more balanced and meaningful. As we navigated this shift in our relationship, I realized that the connection we shared was growing stronger, not in spite of the changes, but because of them. We still had our passionate moments. Of course. But they now coexisted harmoniously with the calmness and peace we both needed. It was no longer about the intensity of the passion, it was about truly being present with each other. In every way. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, wrapped in the quiet comfort of each other's presence, Joseph took my hand and gave me a soft, knowing smile. "This," he said, his voice full of quiet contentment. "This is what I've been needing. Isabella. Just being with you. Without all the pressure. Without the intensity, just being." His words washed over me like a wave of warmth. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I understood. I realized that intimacy didn't have to be defined by grand gestures or intense moments, it could exist in these simple, tranquil spaces we were creating together. In those quiet moments. Those small, everyday exchanges. We were closer than we had ever been before. The connection between us was no longer just about desire, it was about something much deeper. Much more profound. And in that realization, I found a kind of peace that I had never known in our relationship before. The story of Isabella and Joseph is not just a love journey, but also a valuable lesson in finding balance within a relationship. When passion and reason collide, what we often think is perfect may not be everything. True love is not just about passionate or sweet moments, it is about understanding, empathy, and the willingness to change in order to maintain a long-lasting bond. When Joseph requested space to slow things down, Isabella had to face the truth that sometimes intensity is not the glue that holds love together. This is when love truly matures, from burning desire to peaceful moments. From rushed emotions to patience and understanding. This is a message we all need to remember: love is not measured by fiery moments alone, but by how we care for and nurture each other over time. Take the time to understand yourself and your partner. Because true love is not about possession, but about sharing, respecting, and growing together. Never stop learning and evolving. For love is an ongoing journey. Thank you for watching this story. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss out on more inspiring and meaningful videos in the future.